Nearly 3,000 years ago, beneath the blinding sun of Jerusalem, an idea beyond human reason began to take form. A house built, not for a king, but for the presence of the Almighty. The Temple of Solomon, a structure that would defy time itself. 30 meters high, covered with pure gold, its walls shimmered like fire. 2 massive bronze pillars rose at the entrance, each 8 meters tall and weighing more than 30 tons. The walls were lined with cedar, brought from the mountains of Lebanon, carved with patterns of palms and flowers, while the floors of polished cypress glowed with the light of the lamps. Within its holy chambers stood 2 colossal cherubim, each 4.5 meters high, entirely covered in hammered gold. The air itself seemed alive with reverence, every corner, every detail designed to echo eternity. But what made this structure so extraordinary was not the gold, nor the cedar, nor its size. It was the silence. For God had commanded that no sound of iron, no hammer or chisel would ever be heard upon his holy mountain. The very stones of his dwelling were to be shaped in silence, as if molded by the hand of heaven itself. And so, Solomon began a work that united divine purpose and human impossibility. A temple that would take 7 years of relentless labor, consuming more gold than any monument of the ancient world. A temple so precise, so perfect, that even modern engineers cannot comprehend how it was made. The scriptures tell us, in 1 Kings 5:17, that the king commanded to bring great stones, costly stones, hewn with care, to lay the foundation of the house of the Lord. Each stone weighed hundreds of tons, some reaching 400, yet everyone was placed with absolute accuracy. No cranes, no steel, no wheels, just human hands, wooden levers, and unshakable faith. How could such a feat be possible? Even now, thousands of years later, the question remains unanswered. The world sees mystery, but heaven saw obedience. The stonecutters of silence, far from the Temple Mount across the sunburned hills of Judea, the quarries thundered with life, not with hammers but with devotion. There, 80,000 men carved the foundations of the impossible. From dawn until the last flicker of light, they worked in the dust, under the fierce heat of the desert, driven by one command. No sound of iron shall be heard in the house of God. Without modern tools, without dynamite or steel, they shaped mountains with patience and wisdom. The method was both simple and divine. First, the craftsmen traced lines along the stone using harder rocks, marking the path where it would split. Then they drilled small holes along the markings and inserted wedges of dry wood. When water was poured upon them, the wood swelled, and the mountain itself began to move. Hours passed, sometimes days, until with a deep, muffled sound, the rock broke exactly along the line. No explosions, no noise, only the whisper of stone giving way to faith. Every block was then shaped and polished miles away from Mount Moriah. There were no blueprints, no scrolls of design, only symbols engraved into the surface of each stone. Letters, numbers, signs that told the builders where every piece belonged. The architects left no room for error. A single mistake meant losing a block of 400 tons, a monument turned to ruin. It was the most dangerous work of the ancient world. A single miscalculation could send a stone rolling down the mountain, crushing everything in its path. Many men never returned home. Yet still, the quarries never emptied. For some, the labor was sacred duty. For others, it was forced by the hand of the king. The scriptures in 1 Kings 9:21 reveal that Solomon conscripted the remaining Canaanites into service. They worked not by choice, but by command. Day after day, under heat and exhaustion, they cut and shaped what would become the dwelling place of God. Every chisel mark carved miles away was an act of faith. Every silent strike carried the weight of eternity. They built without applause, without comfort, without rest. And though their voices were never recorded, Their stones still speak, whispering the same message through the centuries, that what is built in silence can last forever. The weight of the stones. When the last stone was cut and polished, the next challenge rose like a mountain before them: the transport. Each block, some weighing 400 tons, had to be carried across valleys and slopes toward the holy city of Jerusalem. No machines, no cranes, no wheels of iron. Only the strength of 70,000 men and the conviction that this work was not for a king, but for God himself. From dawn, the quarries filled with commands shouted through the wind. The ground trembled beneath the synchronized steps of hundreds of workers pulling thick ropes woven from plant fibers, each as wide as a man's arm. The stones were placed upon large logs that served as rollers, and ramps of compacted earth stretched for miles across the hills. Slowly, painfully, the blocks began to move, inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat. The journey of a single stone could take weeks, even months. The air filled not with noise but with rhythm, the chant of effort, the creak of wood, the sound of feet pressing into the dust. Supervisors stood atop the ramps, giving signals with raised arms, directing the sacred procession like conductors of a silent orchestra. Every pull was a prayer, every drop of sweat a sacrifice. The danger was constant. If one rope snapped, if one log broke, the stone could roll and crush dozens in an instant. There were no second chances. The silence of the temple had to be preserved, even during transport. The men worked with measured breaths, with fear and devotion intertwined. In those moments, the mountain itself seemed to move with them, as though creation bent its strength toward the will of the Almighty. Through valleys, across rivers, and over barren hills, the stones of Solomon's temple inched closer to the mountain of God. And when one block finally reached Jerusalem, it was greeted not with noise or celebration, but with awe. The commandment of silence remained. If a stone did not fit, it could not be struck or forced into place. It had to be pulled back, adjusted, and returned again, until the divine geometry was perfect. Every error cost lives, time, and strength, yet the work never stopped. For 7 years the nation labored to build a dwelling worthy of heaven, the cedar of kings, but stone alone could not hold the glory of God. The temple also required the most sacred wood in existence, the cedar of Lebanon. Known across the ancient world for its fragrance, beauty, and resistance to decay, this wood symbolized strength and eternity. Yet none grew in Israel. The nearest cedars stood 200 kilometers away, across mountains, valleys, and rivers. To build the house of the Lord, Solomon would need help from another kingdom. 1 Kings 5:6-11 tells of a message sent from Jerusalem to the king of Tyre, Hiram. Solomon requested cedar trees, and Hiram agreed, but not without a price. Israel would pay with 20,000 measures of wheat and 20,000 baths of olive oil each year, more than 4 million liters of grain and 2 million liters of oil. It was an offering of kingdoms, a covenant between two kings, one of the earth and one who sought the favor of heaven. 10,000 men were sent north to the mountains of Lebanon. For a month at a time they lived among the Sidonian lumberjacks, cutting trees that reached the clouds. Each cedar was a giant. Its fall could crush men and reshape the forest. The workers carved, measured, and prepared the trunks with precision, for one mistake could destroy months of effort. Once the wood was ready, the next journey began. The Sidonians bound the trunks together, forming massive rafts that floated across the Mediterranean Sea. They were pushed and guided by smaller boats, gliding slowly along the coast toward the port of Joppa, what we now know as Tel Aviv. From there, the challenge resumed on land. 60 more kilometers stood between the sea and Jerusalem. The same method used for the stones was repeated: ramps, rollers, and ropes. Hundreds of men pulling in unison, one voice commanding, one heartbeat driving them forward. The wood creaked, the ropes stretched, and the ground moaned beneath the weight. But still, the procession advanced. When each trunk finally reached Mount Moriah, it was treated as a treasure. The cedar would line the inner walls of the temple, surrounding the stones with fragrance and warmth. Upon this wood, plates of gold would later be fixed, reflecting light as if the very presence of God was breathing within those walls. And though the cedar came from far away, it would become part of the most sacred place ever built by human hands. The sacred construction. At last, the stones reached Jerusalem. The cedar arrived from the mountains. The foundation was ready. And yet, as the greatest building project of the ancient world began, there was no noise, no hammer, no chisel, no clashing of metal against stone, only silence. The command was clear. The house was built with stones finished at the quarry, so that no hammer or iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built. 1 Kings 6:7. That single verse defined everything that followed. No man could strike iron within the boundaries of the mountain where the presence of God would dwell. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of workers moving enormous stones with perfect coordination, wooden levers creaking, ropes tightening, dust rising beneath their feet, the air heavy with heat, and yet not a single metallic sound could be heard. The temple was rising, stone upon stone in absolute silence. Each block arrived already carved, already measured, already ready. If one piece was even slightly off, it could not be corrected there. It had to be taken back down the hill, reshaped, and brought again. It was a process of sacred patience, a discipline that transformed labor into worship. Supervisors walked among the workers like shadows. Every gesture mattered. Every breath carried weight. A wrong signal could cause a block weighing hundreds of tons to shift and crush dozens of men. They worked under the constant gaze of more than 3,000 overseers and 500 chief officers, each one ensuring that order was never broken. The work became a form of devotion. Silence became a law. And every movement, every pull, every lift was an act of obedience. Even the dust that filled their lungs became part of the offering. The men didn't build for themselves. They built for the eternal. And over time, the mountain itself seemed to fall quiet, as if nature bowed to the holiness of what was being raised. The mountain that once echoed with the sounds of sacrifice during Abraham's time now echoed with reverence again. This was Mount Moriah, the same place where faith had once been tested, now transformed into the dwelling of the Almighty. The language of the stones. To make such a construction possible, the builders developed a system beyond its time. A language written not in ink, but in stone. Symbols and markings covered every block. Letters of ancient Hebrew, numbers, and secret signs were carved to identify where each piece belonged. These symbols were the blueprint of the temple. No scrolls, no sketches. The message of the architects lived upon the stones themselves. The builders could read them like sacred text, each mark revealing how the pieces would interlock, creating a harmony of divine geometry. It was a masterpiece of mathematics and faith, executed in silence without a single word spoken aloud. If one stone carried the wrong marking, chaos could unfold. Entire sections would have to be dismantled. So they checked and checked again. Every symbol was carved with devotion. Every measurement was verified with fear and trembling. The silence made every mistake echo louder in the soul. The work was tense, relentless. The heat of the day gave way to cold, desert nights. Fires flickered across the camp as men rested beside the same stones they would lift at dawn. Many never lived to see the completion of what they built, yet none of their work was wasted. Every life lost became part of the foundation. Every drop of sweat, every breath held in silence was remembered by heaven. And though the air was still, one could almost feel the sound of eternity moving. Each placement of stone was like the ticking of a clock, counting down to the moment when God himself would fill the house with his presence. The temple was not being built in silence by accident. It was being built to teach a truth: that God's greatest works are often formed where no sound is heard, where men move not for applause, but for reverence. The temple was rising, one block, one heartbeat at a time. From a distance it glowed in the light of dawn like a mountain reborn. And upon that sacred ground, heaven and earth were drawing closer. The craftsmen of flame. As the final stones were placed upon the mountain, a new kind of work began, not of strength, but of precision. Now came the fire, the gold, the light. Within the furnaces of Jerusalem, men labored through nights that glowed red against the horizon. Flames roared, metal melted, and in that crucible of heat, beauty was born. The air trembled with intensity as artisans shaped what would soon cover the house of God. For this was not an ordinary building. It was to be the reflection of heaven itself. The temple would contain 27 tons of pure gold, used only for the interior. The Holy of Holies, 9 meters long, 9 meters wide, and 9 meters high, was to be completely covered in sheets of gold so thin they could bend to the wood beneath, yet thick enough to shine like sunlight. It was not paint, it was not imitation, it was real, hammered gold. In the darkness of their forges, men heated small portions of the precious metal until it became liquid fire. They poured it into molds, rolled it, beat it, and shaped it. The rhythm of their work was the heartbeat of devotion, endless hammering, endless turning, endless faith. Sweat fell into the flames and vanished. The smell of burning wood filled the air, mixing with the scent of cedar and the cries of laborers. Some fainted from exhaustion. Others burned their hands through layers of cloth. But no one stopped, for they knew this was no ordinary project. Each strike, each spark, was an act of worship. What they made with their hands would soon hold the glory of the Almighty. At the head of this sacred craft was a man named Hiram of Tyre, the master artisan, son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, skilled in bronze, gold, and all fine metalwork. The scriptures tell us in 1 Kings 7:13-14 that he was filled with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge to accomplish the work set before him. Under his guidance, the fire obeyed. Bronze flowed like rivers. Gold became light. It was Hiram who cast the 2 monumental pillars of the temple, named Jachin and Boaz. Each stood 8 meters high, weighing more than 30 tons. He forged the massive bronze basin known as the sea, supported by 12 oxen, 3 facing each direction, their backs carrying the weight of ritual purification. Everything that touched his hands became sacred. The metal gleamed with meaning. In the glow of the furnace, surrounded by flames, men whispered prayers. The air shimmered like the presence of angels. And though the work was harsh, their hearts were full. For they were not just building an altar, they were shaping eternity. The golden light. When the last sheet of gold was laid upon the cedar walls, the temple transformed. Light no longer entered, it emanated. Every surface reflected fire. Every corner gleamed as though the sun itself had descended to dwell among men. To step inside was to stand in the middle of a golden dawn that never faded. The floor, the ceiling, the walls, all were one continuous river of gold. The scent of cedar filled the air, sweet and alive. The massive cherubim inside the Holy of Holies, each 4.5 meters tall, were carved from wood and completely covered in beaten gold. Their wings stretched from wall to wall, touching one another in the center. Beneath them rested the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of divine presence, the throne of the invisible. It was said that when light touched the gold, it danced upon the surfaces like living fire. Every shimmer reminded the priests that this was not a palace of kings, but the dwelling of the eternal. The temple did not glorify Solomon, it glorified the one who gave him wisdom. Outside, the bronze pillars caught the sunrise, casting their shadows upon the city. Inside, the golden walls caught eternity itself. The temple became more than a structure. It was a mirror of heaven. The closer one came, the quieter the world became. In that silence, one could almost hear creation holding its breath. For soon, this place of gold and stone would no longer be empty. The presence that once guided Israel through the wilderness was about to return. The temple awaited its true inhabitant, the God of Abraham, the God of David, the God of Solomon. Everything, the cedar, the bronze, the fire, the gold, had been prepared for this one moment. The mountain trembled under the weight of divine anticipation. The labor of 150,000 men, the prayers, the silence, the sacrifices, all had led to this. The dwelling was ready. Heaven was near. The dedication of fire. 7 years and 255 days had passed since the first stone was set upon the mountain. The temple, once only a dream in the heart of Solomon, now stood complete. A monument of silence, strength, and sacred fire. Its golden walls shimmered beneath the sun. Its pillars of bronze guarded the entrance like sentinels of eternity. The air around Mount Moriah carried the fragrance of cedar and the weight of awe. It was time. In the 8th month of the 11th year of Solomon's reign, the final stone was laid. The work was finished. Months later, during the Feast of Tabernacles, the people of Israel gathered in Jerusalem. From every tribe and village they came, priests, elders, families, soldiers, all drawn by one purpose, to dedicate the house of the Lord. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant through the city streets, veiled under linen, surrounded by music and reverence. Their steps were slow, their eyes fixed upon the golden doors of the temple. Trumpets sounded softly, their tones trembling like distant thunder. The people fell silent as the ark approached. The cherubim awaited, their wings spread wide over the place prepared for the throne of the Almighty. When the priests entered the Holy of Holies and set the ark beneath the wings, a hush fell over the entire city. Even the wind seemed to stop. For a heartbeat, all creation held its breath. Then, the impossible happened. The scriptures record it in 1 Kings 8:10-11. And it came to pass, when the priests came out of the holy place, that a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house. A cloud, not of smoke, but of glory, filled the temple from floor to ceiling. It rolled through the courts, glowed like living light, and radiated through the city. The presence of God descended upon the work of human hands, sanctifying every stone. As the light filled the temple, Solomon stood before the people. His eyes reflected the glow of the golden walls. His hands lifted toward heaven, and there, before the nation, the king spoke not as a ruler, but as a servant. He prayed. He remembered the promise God had made to his father David, that a house would be built for his name. And now, that promise stood before them, real and radiant. Solomon's words rose into the air like incense, that the God of Israel would dwell not in temples made by hands, but in hearts that fear his name. Outside, tens of thousands of people waited, watching the cloud that hovered above the mountain. And as the prayer ended, Solomon offered a sacrifice unlike anything the world had ever seen. 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. The sound of worship rolled through the valleys like thunder. The ground itself seemed to tremble beneath the feet of the people. The altar blazed with fire. The sky glowed red and gold. The scent of burnt offerings mingled with the cedar smoke that rose into the heavens. It was a symphony of surrender, a nation giving back to God what he had given to them. When the last flame settled and the people fell silent again, Solomon turned and looked upon the temple. And there, beneath the open sky, the truth became clear. The house of the Lord had never been about stone, or wood, or gold. It was about presence, about relationship, about the impossible becoming possible when heaven chooses to dwell among men. The Temple of Solomon was more than the greatest structure of its age. It was a promise made visible, a reminder that silence and obedience can build what power and pride never could. Generations would pass, empires would rise and fall, the gold would fade, the stones would crumble, but the lesson would remain, that God does not live in the noise of the world, but in the stillness of those who wait for him. And so the story of the temple is not just the story of architecture or kings. It is the story of every heart that dares to become a dwelling place for God, shaped in silence, refined by fire, and filled with his glory. For what was once built of stone now lives in spirit, and the glory that once filled a temple of gold now seeks a temple within us. Lord, you who filled the temple of Solomon with your glory, we ask you now to fill the temples of our hearts. Teach us to build not with stone or gold, but with silence, obedience, and faith. When our hands grow tired, remind us that you are the strength behind every work. When our hearts grow restless, whisper to us in the stillness that your presence is not found in the noise of the world, but in the quiet surrender of those who wait on you. Refine us, Lord, as the gold was refined in Solomon's day. Shape us as the stones were shaped in silence, and let our lives become a dwelling place worthy of your Spirit. May your glory fill us as it filled the holy place. May your peace dwell where anxiety once lived. May your voice be the sound that guides our steps. For we are the living temples now, formed by your hands, sanctified by your blood, and made eternal by your presence. Let our hearts shine with the same golden light that filled the ancient sanctuary. And when the world sees us, may they see not us, but you, living within. In the name of the one who is our foundation, our fortress, and our everlasting King. Amen. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment to share it, to subscribe to this channel, and to walk with us through the stories that reveal the heart of God. Every week, we uncover the mysteries of His Word, stories that still breathe life into those who listen. May His presence go with you until we meet again.